The time being 10:30 p.m. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima from East Burwood, opening the transmission for tonight. And as is our custom, we'll be running a half hour of pre-recorded material leading up to the crossband that we hold between this frequency 147.475 and people who want to talk in on 439.225. That's 439.225 megahertz in the 70 centimetre band. And if you'd like to join the conversation, that's the frequency to join while you listen here. So it's a full duplex arrangement. Usually we have 3 ACZ, Peter, VK3ARD, Matty, sometimes others. We'll see how it pans out. To start tonight's transmission, as a conclusion of the 30-minute coverage of the BBC's 90th anniversary, which was recorded in November 2012. It largely deals with the biography of the first BBC chief engineer, Peter Pendleton Eckersley. And we'll go over to that now. The BBC's 50th anniversary historical review program, as broadcast on the 3rd of November 2012.
Coney's London headquarters, Arthur Burrows, who was a key backstage presence in those first wireless broadcasts, would send down what we would call a playlist.
Actually, the programme material came from Arthur Burrows, who was chief publicity man at Marconi House, and he used to send down the records, and he used to send down, I suppose, about every other week, an artist, a sort of 10 guinea person, you know, who came down, plus expenses. 10 guineas in those days.
Like Winifred Collins.
There was big cases, wooden cases and that all around. We sort of had to step over them and all the different equipment to find a little table and talked into a microphone. There was a song at that time that was quite popular, and it was very short. It was called Absent, but I sang that. But we had to start off with a tuning fork and the hum of the electrical things that were going on at the same time. I think I got 10 shillings a night. I thought it was wealth. In those days, it's a long time ago, you know.
So they'd go to the Cock and Bell before every Tuesday, is it, that before they transmitted?
When they were doing a concert, you know, according to legend, they put a piano on a wheelbarrow and wheeled the iron. But so when they were doing a concert, they would have moved this piano. We actually have the piano.
And this is the piano they used?
That's the piano they used from the Cock and Bell pump, yes.
Fantastic. And it actually, it sort of still works.
It's horrendously out of tune. Well, it hadn't been used for years because it survived because it had been walled in an upstairs room in the pub.
So they would play ballads, comic routines. What would they do on the piano?
They did everything in the broadcasts. The piano was for rather special occasions. I mean, shown here, we've got Nora Scott, who is about to sing, who was brought all the way from London. But they had a gramophone, which they used to play. It was rather nice because the gramophone's designed to go in a very posh lounge, had doors on, so you couldn't see the speakers all the time. And the engineers used those as the volume control. Gradually opening the doors, and you've got this sort of fade in and fade out of the music. And that was how it was done.
Very ingenious.
And if you wanted it louder, you just moved the microphone nearer. If you wanted it softer, you moved the microphone further away. We were able to keep one of the smoothest volume control that has ever been invented.
Well, it is. Hello, thank you. This has all been going on. I'm sorry there was a bit misunderstanding. A little bit of a technical hitch. Yes, you have them too. I know, aren't they awful? But anyway, I think we'll be ready to begin now. And the first thing I've got to introduce...
The other thing that Eckersley does is understand that somehow broadcasting is not like a speech or a meeting.
Broadcasting historian Gene Seaton.
It's you to another person who's listening. And so he gets this conversational tone. He doesn't get all stiff. And he knows that although there's one of you and you're broadcasting to many, for each individual listener, you're talking to them with a certain authoritative intimacy. Eckersley absolutely instinctively found his way to a tone of address that was then used later in the BBC.
And we were indeed not only pioneers in transmission, we were pioneers in programme. We, in fact, did the first radio play that I suppose was ever broadcast.
The Riddle chap's choice of play was pretty upmarket. Worse, it was French. Émile Rostand's drama about the man with the prominent hooter, Cyrano de Bergerac.
And we chose that bit where Cyrano makes love to Roxane in the balcony as a deputy for the young man, remember? And, of course, that is played on the stage in the dark, so we thought that was pretty well suitable for sound broadcasting.
Cyrano de Bergerac, rehearsed, presented, performed, modulated, and I think almost knocked off the air due to overmodulation by one P.P. Eckersley.
Yeah.
Rolls Wynne was Peter Eckersley's partner in the more experimental Riddle offerings.
The cast consisted of course, P.P. Eckersley, Cyrano, Marion Travers, Aggie, Dennis Ross.
Yes.
I think was the Rustling Leaves. It's about as far as I was trusted. But what is most memorable about that, the way bearing in mind the way things are done now, was the rehearsal which took place about an hour before it went on the air, when we solemnly handed round a spoon representing a Peel Connor microphone.
So you've got a photo here, Jeff, of the Riddle site. And these were taken from what, Marconi's own plane?
Yes, they had a little biplane.
I mean, it literally is a hut in a field. And you've got over here one of the original microphones. I mean, to me, well, it's nothing like the microphone that we're using right now. I mean, it really does look like a bit fallen off an old telephone or something. I mean, is that fair?
Yes, it's very, very simple. I suppose it's a carbon granule microphone.
And what's this thing?
This is a mock-up of a crystal set. It's a big cheat. It's all on a sound chip. But you can tune it in, and then if we tune the set, can you just hear the noise coming in?
Yeah, I can hear it now. There he is. That kind of clipped, high kind of voice that people had. But you can imagine, can't you, if you were one of the first listeners, it must have been so exciting to hear this voice coming at you across the airwaves.
Yes, and it would have been at this volume as well, very, very low volume.
So you'd have had to really
just
concentrate.
Coming through the headphones, yeah.
Very good.
There you are, and that's the gramophone on that occasion.
While Eckersley and co were having great fun in an army hut in a field outside Chelmsford, in the heart of London, a more formal broadcasting structure was beginning to take shape.
And here we are at Marconi House. Now this was the place that, was Marconi's headquarters in London. This is where Marconi broadcast from. Their call sign was 2LO. And effectively this building, adjoining the Strand, is where the BBC started.
2LO Marconi House, London, calling. 2LO Marconi House, London, calling. 2LO.
And this is what's happened to Marconi House now. How are the mighty fallen? Magnificent apartments and penthouses with bespoke services, says the sign. A unique collection of suites and 1 and 2, 3 bedroom apartments within a Grade 2 listed facade, adjoining a new 5-star hotel. Marconi House offers an exclusive lifestyle in a world-class location in the heart of the West End. They should be paying me for this.
Marconi House, London, calling. 2LO, Marconi House, London.
I think it was late September 1922. I was hauled out of a lesson to the telephone, and a voice said, can you collect 1 or 2 people and come up and do an experimental concert in Marconi House?
2 of the people who made their way up the stairs from the bustle of the Strand were the music hall artist Helena Millay and a young singer who would later become famous as a radio actress, Vivian Chatterton.
The voice said, well, it's for a new invention called wireless. And I said, well, what's wireless? And the voice said, well, it's a means whereby music is going to be brought into people's homes. So I got a couple of people, and I was going to sing Max Brooks' Ave Maria. And in due course, we got to Marconi House and were taken up in a lift to a little tiny room right at the very, very top of the house, which was an absolute shambles. I can't tell you. The floor was cluttered up with wires, and there were cases and goodness knows what. There was a piano.
And I was taken up to the top of Marconi House in a very tiny room, hung with sort of white butter muslin.
A dingy room, 20 feet square, with a faded green carpet, a grand piano, a worn-out settee with the horsehair coming through.
I remember strongly a set of bells, tubular bells, and a grand piano and a desk, and what looked to me like a telephone mouthpiece hanging from the ceiling.
A microphone of the type commonly used in public telephone boxes was suspended in front of each performer. We have one of those old microphones here, and we also have with us the first singer whose name appears in such records as exist of our early programs. So here's an impression of what it sounded like to listeners at that time.
Cecil Lewis, a much decorated fighter pilot in the First World War, later one of the BBC's first radio producers.
2LO calling, 2LO calling. That was Drake Goes West, sung by Mr. Leonard Hawke, baritone. One moment, please, while we move the piano.
We had a habit of holding up the programs to move pianos and microphones about. Also, every 7 minutes, we had to close down for 3 minutes, in case we were interfering with the government services.
And joining them in the tiny studio at Marconi House was the classical pianist Maurice Cole.
It would be, I should think, in the autumn of 1922. And in due course we fixed up that I should play it, I think, about half a dozen short, very short programs for a very, very tiny fee. And these were to be specially transmitted, to be received at the first all-British radio exhibition, I think that's what they called it, that was held in a hall not very far away from Marconi House.
On September the 30th, 1922, this place, the Royal Horticultural Hall in Pimlico, was the venue for Britain's first wireless exhibition. So this cavernous sort of Edwardian hall would have been full of exhibitors and manufacturers and radio clubs and societies and all the rest of it. And I've got a copy here of the very first programme. So September the 30th, Saturday, you could have heard at 3 o'clock Mr. Rodney Bennett, baritone, in Summertime on Breedon. Mr. Walter Glynn, tenor, country folk. Miss Catherine Last, for solo violin. Then the next day, Monday, October the 2nd, my birthday, humorist, just said selected, so you don't know where you're getting with him. Mr. Rex Faithful, baritone, Glorious Devon. It's all splendid stuff, and of course it would all have been broadcast to the people in this hall from Marconi House. These weren't people performing live. This was the first radio broadcast of this kind of material to a kind of captive audience, I suppose.
And it was a great adventure to broadcast, of course. I remember one man coming up to tell me one night, we call them studio managers nowadays, I think they were balance and control or something in those days, came up and whispered in my ear while I was playing, "It's coming over very nicely." I was nearly put off. I nearly stopped at this point, you know.
What the radio manufacturers really wanted, of course, was to shift their products. The problem was that people would only fork out for a set if there was regular material for them to listen to. The delay in the general introduction of wireless broadcasting, said the Daily News, is a sore blow to our pride in our business efficiency. The thing has been in the air for some 6 months. The public has been ready to give wireless a warm welcome. But like people on the wrong wavelength, we can only hear vague rumours of more conferences. At last, on the 18th of October 1922, in the august premises of the Institution of Electrical Engineers, the British Broadcasting Company was signed into existence, with, as Jean Seaton observes, a rather clever arrangement.
They don't want one company to get to be the monopoly business that sells all the radios in Britain. So what they do is they biff heads together and say, well, you've all got to get together in a company and we'll produce a company that will then produce the broadcasting which you all have to take. And what's interesting about that is that, if you like, there's this other model, I think, that's going on that goes right the way back again to the end of the 19th century, which is a kind of, dare I say it, Fabian tradition of the public utility. So they call on this notion of a public utility, and that hostility towards commercialisation and commercial monopoly is transmuted by John Reith when he gets to set up the BBC into hostility to commercial takeover. It's an extraordinary story. It starts with, we don't want a monopoly of one firm making radios, and it ends up with a monopoly of one firm making broadcasts and radios. How you do that particular bit of turning a pig's ear into a silk purse is genius.
Thus, sponsored by those 6 great firms, the British Broadcasting Company came into being. And to Stanton Jeffries I sent a memorandum, which perhaps may be considered a milestone in the history of British broadcasting, which Jeffries has treasured. The document he will now read to you.
A.R. Burrows to L. Stanton Jeffries, London Station Director. The British Broadcasting Committee has arranged to transmit the following programme each evening, Saturdays and Sundays included, until further notice, from the London Broadcasting Station 2LO. 6 p.m. News Bulletin, 8 to 9 Music, 9 to 9:30 News, 9:30 to 10 Music. This is 2LO, the London station of the British Broadcasting Company calling. 2LO calling.
The director of Marconi's London wireless station, Stanton Jeffries, and before him, Arthur Burrows. The BBC was born in the middle of a political tornado. Then as now, Britain was governed by a coalition of Conservatives and Liberals. But the very next day after the foundation of the new company, the Tories decided to walk out of the coalition. David Lloyd George's government collapsed and a general election was called for Wednesday, the 15th of November.
Here is the last news bulletin for today. General Situation Section. The following items of news indicate...
The BBC's very first broadcast, a news bulletin read by Arthur Burrows of the Marconi Company, took place on the 14th, the day before Britain went to the polls. It was a landmark in our cultural history, but at the time it was largely overshadowed by the excitement of the coming election. The new company hadn't yet appointed the man who was to lead it, a Scottish political activist called John Reith, who would shape the entire course of broadcasting in this country. It was not until a month later, on the 14th of December, that Reith went for a job interview in the offices of the AEG engineering company, Magnet House.
And this rather unprepossessing spot is where they set up shop. This is now a site on Kingsway. It's 60s office blocks, all that's worst about 1960s modernism. But actually, in the 1920s, this was Magnet House. It was one of many magnet houses all across the country owned by GEC. And this is the place that Reith chose as the location for the BBC's very first offices. The studios were down on the other end of Kingsway, and they used to say it was an enlivening sprint from the office down to the studio. So, let's go. So we're going down Kingsway now. I have to confess, I'm not sprinting, because I'm probably fatter than the BBC's original staff would have been in the 1920s. But you get a sense, I suppose, of the kind of journey they'd have made every day, you know, running down from the offices to the studio. And if you'd been coming down here in 1922, you'd have come to Marconi House on the end, but first you'd have gone past one of the great icons of the BBC, Bush House, which back then was a building site. They were still doing it, so they'd have come dashing round the corner, past all the scaffolding and the builders and the dust and the noise, and down to the bottom to Marconi.
But the biggest joke of all, as it seems now, was that during the daytime, the studio itself was used as an office by my old friend Jeff, the station director, more officially known as Mr. Stanton Jeffries.
Yes, there I sat while engineers tested microphones, a typist clicked away morning, noon and night, and streams of artists poured in begging for engagements.
There was no precedent, no store of experience to be tapped, no staff ready to hand with metal proved in a similar field. It was all left to us.
If you think, what models have they got?
Professor Jean Seaton, the BBC's historian.
They've got the model of the concert. You go to the concert and you hear the concert and you go home. It's a one-off thing. They've got newspapers which are a bit nearer the mark. Films, you go and see a film, then you go home. So they've got to discover what this odd thing that broadcasting will be and when it will be in people's lives and what time of day it will happen, and it will go on continuously. Certainly in about 1924, there's a wonderful manual about how to listen, that you should sit down, listen very carefully, and Reith gets incredibly exercised by the notion that people might listen like water on a tap. You turn the water on and they just go on listening. And that would mean that they weren't giving the proper kind of attention to each individual programme. So you had gaps between programmes at first in order to cleanse the hearing palate.
Nobody could tell to what extent broadcasting would catch on, nor indeed whether it would take on at all.
For the pioneers of radio like Arthur Burrows, it must have seemed an experience to set beside the adventures of Victorian explorers like Stanley and Livingstone, a journey into untouched, mysterious territory with no maps or compasses to guide them, discovering all the potential and the problems along the way. Leading the explorers was, of course, John Reith, and at his side, his assistant, Ruth Cockerton.
If he telephoned your office, and if you didn't immediately recognise his voice, even if you'd never heard it before, you were almost liable to instant execution.
And 3 rings on your telephone
Yes.
usually meant that the director was on the
Yes. 1 ring was an ordinary person, 2 rings was the controller, Admiral
right.
Carpendale, 3 rings was the Director General.
That's right, and
And once the telephone rang 4 times, and somebody said, well, that must be God.
Following items of news indicate the general situation in the country.
This is the national program from
Copyright
London.
in these
BBC
items
Productions Director is going to talk to you tonight about some forthcoming...
High Mass in Westminster Cathedral today, His Eminence Cardinal Bourne
His
made
London
the
calling,
following
Mr.
declaration.
R.C. Michelson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of our weekly broadcasts to our listeners in Europe.
Santos Kasane, the famous teacher of dancing.
This new dance being introduced to this country consists of different variations taken from the blues, tango, charleston.
Now, here is Marion Cram, who is going to give you another of her garden talks.
Well, then, do you remember the notices that hung about in the studios?
Yes.
Like, don't cough, you may deafen thousands. Or, please refer to listeners and not listeners in.
And the man who issued that edict was inevitably John Reith himself. As a son of the manse, as the saying goes, Reith filled the early airwaves with religion. And as the momentous broadcasting year of 1922 slipped into the first days of 1923, Reith chose a sober ecclesiastical voice, Dr. Archibald Fleming of St Columba's Church, Pont Street, to welcome in the new year. The good Dr. Fleming did so in memorably gloomy style, although he did strike an appropriately seafaring note.
To be the last in the year 1922 to speak to you is a responsibility before which the most confident might quake. For you are about to transship from the vessel which bore you across the sea of 1922 into that which is now to carry you over the uncharted waters of 1923. And to me is given the opportunity of advising you what to take along with you and what you had better leave behind. Many thousands who are at this moment invisibly grouped in this wonderful whispering gallery will never reach the end of the New Year's voyage at all.
But for Reith, Burrows, Eckersley and Lewis, the voyage into 1923 was to be the beginning of a golden era.
So the next leg of our little tour of this corner of London takes us to the 3rd place that the BBC occupied, because the very next year they needed bigger facilities. Basically, they moved just down the Strand to a new building which was the Institution of Electrical Engineers. Savoy Hill, they called it.
I think we can't underestimate the importance or excitement of the Savoy Hill days.
The writer and expert on radio history, Sean Street.
Because it was a string of firsts. It was the first outside broadcast. It was the first Ascot. It was the first Wimbledon. It was the first boat race. It was the first symphony concert. All these things were happening for the very first time. Everything was a new challenge. Everything was testing the medium.
This is the national program.
Now we're going to take you over to Wimbledon for a running commentary on the All-English Championship by Colonel Brand.
Here we are again in the centre court of Wimbledon, just in time for the end.
And this is it. 2 Savoy Hill was the address. There it is, number 2. It's all blocked off now. It's a sort of door that they don't use. On the side of this great, handsome, red brick building behind the Savoy Hotel. But even so, there's something nice, really, to think that these are the steps. That's the entrance. That's the portal they'd have walked through when they went upstairs to go and do those pioneering first broadcasts.
When I first told my friends that I was going to Persia, I discovered that to most of them, Persia was little more than a vague
Now we're taking you over to St Hilary, Cornwall for the first broadcast of the Nativity play. Mr Filson Young is in the...
But I liked the one that was hung out up in the corridor with a few lengths of fire hose and a whistle. And it said, "In case of fire, blow this whistle loud and long."
And it's nice, actually. They've got the plaque here with the original BBC logo. I actually prefer it to the current logo. From 1923 to 1932, it says, "The studios and offices of the British Broadcasting Company and its successor, the British Broadcasting Corporation, were in this building." It's funny, actually, because I must have walked past this building or walked near it dozens, hundreds of times. It's one of those big London office institution buildings that you walk past and you never think about it. You don't think twice, you just walk past it. And yet it was here that I suppose the BBC had its, if not its first home, then this was its first heart, really.
Little Betty Bouncer is kind to her people and a nice girl, more or less.
But at present... In those days, it was a pretty nerve-wracking experience, because the studios, or at any rate one of them, very heavily draped with curtains, and if you were a singer, your voice felt as if it had simply gone out of the window, flat as could be.
Little Miss Bouncer loves an announcer down at the BBC.
And if you were an instrumentalist, you wondered what on earth had happened.
One of the BBC's first and most famous announcing voices, Stuart Hibberd.
And then the microphone was a most uninspiring object. It was a very fearsome-looking thing until it was covered by a rather artistic-looking silk, blue and gold silk case. I remember we used to call it the artistic meat safe.
Little Miss Bouncer loves an announcer down at the BBC.
So the great thing about this place was, in many ways, the location. We are really right in the heart of Theatreland. So you can get people from the West End theatres, you can get people who are performing at the Savoy Theatre. Perfectly placed for the BBC's first house band, the Savoy Orpheans, so they're just a couple of minutes away. Because you're on the embankment, you're quite close to Parliament. You can get politicians in. You can get people from their clubs, from St James's, had a few drinks, come up to do a broadcast. And there was this sort of very convivial, warm, friendly atmosphere. As one of the first sort of meeters and greeters, I suppose, Arthur Phillips remembered.
Oh, it was very, very chummy indeed, and particularly after 5:30. I would have to accompany people to the studio. I can remember taking up Amy Johnson, Gracie Fields, C.B. Cochrane, Edgar Wallace, take them up to the studios, and the atmosphere was really chummy. After all, there weren't many people on the staff in those days. We all knew each other and so on. My greatest moment when I found John Snagg knew my name. Mind you, he only said, "Phillips, go and get my supper," but at least that was something. So at 5:30, Colonel R.H. Brand, who was called the host, and the 2 duty announcers for the evening used to don black ties, and they would greet the artists in the hall as they came, give them a drink, and then conduct them up to the studios, and the announcer would stay with them, having made the announcement, and bring them down afterwards back into the green room, where he would hand them an envelope containing their fee, which the night cashier had given to him just prior to the broadcast.
The BBC was on its way. Savoy Hill, for all its shortcomings and lack of space, was a congenial place. The cascade of performers pouring through its studios grew into a mighty river of talent. There was perhaps one little whisper of cloud on John Reith's horizon, the appearance of one Captain Leonard Plugg, who in 1925 persuaded Selfridges to sponsor Britain's first commercial radio broadcast from that notorious den of iniquity, Paris. Soon Reith's monopoly would face a more sustained commercial challenge, and soon Britain itself would be plunged into the Second World War, perhaps wireless's finest hour. But that, as they say, is another story. For the time being, it was all such fun.
There'll be soft light
lights and sweet music.
And I think it cannot be more sufficiently emphasized that pioneer adventure was born in laughter, was nurtured in laughter, and died in laughter.
Some of them scheming and some of them dreaming of love.
London calling. We are now taking you over to the Savoy Hotel for dance music by the Savoy Orpheans and Havana bands until midnight.
Oh, you're taking us over to VK3AML in Burwood East, who's now listening on 439.225, and the first usual caller is Peter VK3ACZ. Are you there, Peter?
I am VK3AML, VK3ACZ. Good evening, Chris.
Yeah, g'day, Pete. Hope you've had a good day. I have a few clips which I'll play later on. I've tuned around the DRM broadcasters on HF radio today, and I found quite a few that were with English language programming unexpected. The Voice of Romania, for example. Anyway, what have you been up to? VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
I barely got myself through today. It's been a struggle, but so I better not go into that. I did listen to last night's broadcast again, but only on the OD Cologne, so but then I probably don't need to comment on the quality of the audio. I think you've absolutely nailed it. I got on radio today. Only Alan, VK1 Alpha Oscar, Portable 4, he was up on the McAllister Range in Canetoad County, which is between Port Douglas and Cairns. So it's about 2,200 something kilometres, give or take an inch. And of all things, at 4 p.m, I worked him on 40 metres, which really surprised me. I would have thought that time of the afternoon, clearly it's winter, because you wouldn't have had a hope that early.
That's quite a distance. That's about 4,000 kilometres or something.
Well, 2,200 and something.
Oh, right.
But
okay.
It's, again, middle of the day, you normally get about 1,300 kilometres out of 40 metres in my humble experience with my minimalist setup. But it was, he gave me a 5.2 from up there, but we were both 5.7 a few minutes later on 20 metres. Big difference, obvious difference. And so that was about it. The bit I would shamefully admit to, only with a loaded gun to my head normally, was I was on the Dumbstar users group net at 8 p.m. tonight with Mr. QSL and a few others, one New Zealander, and that's been about the size of a beautiful WX today. Started the day early with, very foggy as you...
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I didn't see very much. It was all a sea of grey or white.
Looking east from here down Burwood Highway at about 9 o'clock, the Dandenongs were completely invisible. It was just a white-out scene, particularly in the valleys. It was one of those ground fogs, that hangs low.
Yeah, and I thought long and hard about putting my 2-metre beam into the air to see if there was any enhancement on VHF, but didn't. I left it until this evening, and I didn't hear any beacons. And there's often a net between VK7 and VK3 when conditions allow on 144.190 at 8:30 p.m. I heard nothing, so no tropospheric extravaganza tonight that I could detect. I did speak to somebody. I spoke to a station out in Scumbury. So I went to write that in my logbook. I'm so used to calling it Scumbury. Yes, Sunbury on 144.100 earlier on in the evening. That was rather nice, even with the beam pointed in the opposite direction. He was still readable, but came up to 30 over 9 when we were pointing at each other. So that's the size of it, Chris. Nothing exciting to relate.
I
Please tell
don't
me
blame
you
you
had
at all for trying for enhancement, because I was looking this evening, for example, at the horizon and noting that the fog was going up to a certain level and then stopping. And usually the point at which the fog stops, if it's a sudden discontinuity, that indicates a temperature inversion. And that could be the source of a duct. But I didn't hear any significant enhancement from anywhere, so I don't know what that was. Coming home tonight at just after nightfall, we had a dinner at a Vietnamese restaurant in Camberwell with the widow of Tony Sanderson, Anna Sanderson, who's been a good friend of ours for, 47 years now. She married Tony in 1981, and the dinner was partly for her birthday, which is today, and partly for the anniversary yesterday of 20 years since Tony Sanderson, VK3AML's passing, and talking about the various aspects that we remembered over a very nice Vietnamese dinner. But coming home, up past Highfield Park, which is along Riversdale Road, Camberwell, near St Dominic's big bluestone church, the most extraordinary ground fog. I've seen it often in Tasmania. It's where you have a grassy oval and the fog is only about 1 metre high. People were playing football and literally you could only see from their waist up, looking obliquely across the field. Strangest effect. And the oval was illuminated for the night play, and that added to the effect. It was like them playing football in a heaven, an imagined heaven scene from some 1950s badly designed musical flick. Quite extraordinary.
I can picture that.
So anyway, it's been a bit of a social day. I've also had a bit of a gallop on video I did for Surrey Hills and Box Hill Historical Society, using a compilation of home movies made by a man named Norman Carter. Apparently he's been put in for a historical prize for historical publications in the field for the Royal Historical Society of Victoria. So I had to make 3 memory stick copies for that for Surrey Hills Historical Society to submit to RHSV for consideration for the prize. I don't know what the prize consists of, probably just a certificate and a free pen or something. I don't think it involves any cash payment, but it'd be nice to get it. We'll see how that pans out. Apart from that, as I say, I've been doing a lot of listening on DRM sites, and I can confirm that there are a lot more DRM stations transmitting English than just Radio New Zealand, which really surprised me. One was the BBC. They have 2 frequencies. The BBC, I'll just flicking over here, the particular frequency I picked them up on at 3 p.m, and it was only, I think, a 1-hour program, 5875 kilohertz. Now, if I can dial this up, I can give you a sample. Let's just see, 5875. Here we go.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC World Service with Anne Soy in Nairobi and James Cotnell in London.
A state of emergency has been declared in Venezuela as one of the strongest tremors in a century hits the country. 2 powerful earthquakes hit the South American country seconds apart, collapsing buildings.
Well, you can tell that it's not quite up to the standards of normal AM on the broadcast band, but for 5875 kilohertz, the quality is not too bad, particularly considering that that's just a tack-on, one-size-fits-all DRM converter used by one of the web SDRs that I was decoding it through. I think that was transmitted from Britain and received at near Granada in the south of Spain. That would be in the order of about 800 kilometres, I think. Back to you, Pete.
It almost sounded FM quality. Chris, just as an aside, I looked out the door for the first time in a couple of hours, and a real pea super has set in here.
Oh.
It's I can't even see the street lights down at the corner, which is, 100 metres away. So there you go. It's very foggy. I might see if I can get an early start and point that 2-metre beam down to the west to see if I can pick up the Western District crew who are on every morning.
Okay.
From Mount Gambier across, Karamat, Warrnambool, Portland, all those guys I might see in the morning. Anyway, getting back to subjects at hand. Still on not quite the same frequencies, but from the similar region. On the Coffin Cheaters net this morning, Mr. Hotel Kilo, Mr. Hong Kong, 3HK, broadcast a little thing about a snippet from, 198, the long wave about to close down very soon. And
Saturday,
Drew,
in
bless
fact.
his heart, made the comment that, that leaves a whole lot more long wave for amateur radio experimenters. But then he
wish.
Yeah, then he checked himself and said, yeah, right. So we can dream, can't we, Chris?
Look, it may actually pan out that we do get a slightly broader band there. It'd be nice to have enough space for one decent sideband signal. At the moment, we are only allowed to transmit a sideband signal 2.1K wide, but within that bandwidth, you could easily transmit free DV, so that has possibilities. And I know that from tests I did some 15 years ago with 3HP Grant, who was transmitting from down at Mornington, he was transmitting digital slow scan television pictures to me using a similar sort of conveyance system for the digital information as DRM. And we found that it worked extremely well at any time of the day. It doesn't suffer from the selective fade you get on HF. The phase coherence of the different parts of the passband were excellent. And although there's a lot of natural noise there, static crashes and all that sort of thing, even if the sig to noise is not good, its potential for conveyance of digital information is actually very good. So while analog speech transmissions might not work so well there, I think it's a wide open field for somebody to try free DV. I don't think anybody has yet.
Well, with my understanding is, and I might be wrong here, but the NDBs are disappearing faster than all get out. I know that Moorabbin's still operating. I heard that just recently.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder why the option to increase the amateur use of long wave is not forthcoming. Or
I don't think it's
speculated
actually
about.
been considered. It's the last time they considered this was when the band was made available to the amateurs, the 630 metres I'm talking, 472 to 479 kilohertz, I think it is. And I think that was opened up for amateur usage. Peter 3YE, who was almost the first on the band, would know better than I, but I think it was about 2012 or 2013. So we've had the restrictions for that band were framed in the context of 10 years ago, where there were far more, where there was far more usage by NDBs, and the 500 kilohertz frequency used by ships as their standard frequency had only recently, I think in 2000 or 2001, been rescinded. So there's no longer the usage of 500 kilohertz there was. So there's every reason to expect that we might be able to get a slight increase in that band. I've often thought that if all the stations eventually disinherit AM broadcasting, it's an excellent opportunity for people like Dave ASE, VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
Yes, 3AML, 3ACZ returning. Well, of course, that's why I will be standing on the side and cheering everybody on. Given that 160 metres stretches me that I'm relying on a worm burner antenna, mind you, it's performing better than a non-resonant length of wet string. It could be a lot better, but it could also be a lot worse, is my point. Yeah, I think, as I said, I'll just have to cheer on everybody who's going for it in a big way. And I do remember a couple of those YouTube videos from people when the allocation was given to us that they, or one particular fellow, and I can't remember who it was now, but on the very same day that it became legalised, produced a video of his first experimental attempts. So, yeah, as I said, I'll be cheering on anybody willing to do some more experimenting and give it a go, and it certainly sounds like fun. But then again, I sit on the side waiting for somebody to get a really good microwave dish up the point at the moon so that I can go and do some EME at their place. Like as I've often said, normally somebody gets a swimming pool and people that they didn't know were friends turn up with their bathers and all that. Well, when I find out somebody's got a new EME station going, I'll be turning up to use their equipment just so that I can hear my voice come back from the moon. Forget about sending data. Yeah, so I'm all about the voice. So needless to say, I know it means big power and a big dish.
Yes.
But yeah, getting back to long wave, Chris, funny that Australian broadcasting didn't take it on, and I think it was you who once told me that it was because of the QR Nelly that we would get.
In the tropics, yes.
In the tropics, yeah. So it lends itself more to European stuff. Is that still...
That's true.
Okay.
It was, basically, it was used in that region, I forget, I think region 1, I'm not sure. But the long wave stations extended from Iceland in the west through to Vladivostok in the east, right through Russia to the Pacific coast. So it was a broad band, but it was at fairly high latitudes that don't experience too much in the way of tropical thunderstorms, which generate the noise that really interferes with long wave communication. But long wave is wonderful in that it doesn't fade very much. It's receivable over long distances right around the clock. Has terrific, ground wave coverage. And in the days of crystal sets, the advantage of long wave was that the diminution of the signal with distance was much less in terms of power than it was at higher frequencies, so that a non-amplifying system, such as a pair of headphones with a crystal receiver, would receive signals over a much longer distance than somebody trying to do it with 200 metres or less of wavelength. All of that changed when valves came in and amplification became available, because then it became very quickly obvious that shortwave long-distance communication had its place. But its place isn't all the day round. As you know, 80 metres works best at night, 15 metres works best during the day, and the bands in between work at varying degrees through the 24-hour cycle. One person I spoke to who had a lot of experience with toning in with those diurnal changes was the late VK3JG, not the present one, who was in...
Well, the present one I went to school with.
Well, the old 3JG, up to the time of his death in his 90s, which would have been about 10 years ago, was the man in charge of the fax receiving system at Rockbank, the OTC station associated with the transmitting station at Balan. Well, actually at Fiskville, south of Balan. And he told me that eventually, by employing every trick known to man in terms of long path, short path, ionospheric prediction, etc., they could get good fax reception from Europe or America around 18 hours a day, but certainly not 24. And that's where, of course, undersea cable services and satellite services have a bit of an advantage.
Yeah, when you talk about just south of Balan now, that whole area is taken up with those wind turbines, which looks rather odd. You probably saw that from the train last time you went to Ballarat. But,
a little bit. I saw it more, actually, when I went to 3BIG's place, Don Bainbridge.
Okay.
And Don has a place on a hill with a slope pointing south. And by golly, there are about 50 of them. They're a fair distance from him. They're on the horizon.
Yeah, they all sprung up after I retired. I remember that there was a place you could see the far side of Ballarat, and at night you noticed the red lights attached with those turbines, looking towards Ararat. But speaking of 3 Juliet Golf, yes, I can't remember how I found out that we'd both been at the same technical school. I was 3 years ahead of him, but it was interesting to discuss teachers, and it was usually the ones that were the heaviest or the hardest strappers.
You always remember the teachers either that are the best or the worst.
Well, funny, the best were the ones who strapped the hardest, and I presume that had something to do with keeping control of the kids.
It probably meant that you were a miscreant.
Well, I psyched out one of my teachers. I was always looking for ways. Well, tell you what, I quickly worked out at home that my grandmother her method of discipline was to strap us in the back of the legs with a belt, leather belt. And I decided that I was going to show no response at all. I was going to grit my teeth, and no matter how much it hurt, I was going to show nothing. And of course, when my younger brother was being belted for something, he was crying out saying, "Why don't you hit Peter? He did it too." And my grandma said, "But I would, but it won't work on him." And I'd won a battle, so I never forgot that for when I had kids of my own. I figured that if you had to resort to any sort of physical discipline, you'd already lost.
Yes.
So, but getting back to the teachers and all that, no, it was maybe it was keeping control that did the best, but I think it was a natural thing in the kids to want to play up and test the limits and all that. But I'm way off track. Sorry about that.
No.
It was just, you mentioned 3 Juliet Golf, and that reminded me of the current one, who Jeff was in Werribee, and he's now up in Avoca. And I hear him on 7115 most afternoons. Sometimes on the Anzanet on 20 metres as well. But nice guy, Jeff. If you hear him, always say hello to him. Good value.
Okay, Jeff.
Getting back to long wave and all that, are you aware of any experiments that were done here? Like, did the ABC initially broadcast on long wave? Because I've got a funny feeling you did mention something about that, or am I wrong?
It wasn't the ABC we know. It was the Australian Broadcasting Company that preceded it. When 3LO first came on the air, they were, I forget which frequency this corresponds to, but they were on 1750 metres, I think it was, which is something like 180 kilohertz. But of course, antennas, even professional antennas of any reasonable size at that time, we're talking 1924, were hopelessly small and hopelessly inefficient at that frequency. And so eventually, I think in 1925, I think it was late in 1925, 3LO switched to something like 770 kilohertz, not too far from where they are now. And but 3AR has always been around 620 kilohertz, give or take 5 kilohertz up or down, I think. The station, there were a variety of stations allocated different frequencies very early on. I think 2FC was also on long wave initially, but quickly, by about 1926, it changed its frequency into what now is the broadcast band. And the very last station anywhere in Australia, broadcast station, to change from long wave to the current medium wave band was 6WF in Perth, and that happened sometime early in 1929. There have been proposals since then to start up an Australian long-wave broadcast band, and in fact, after Peter Eckersley was fired from the BBC for marital infidelities by Sir John Reith in 1929, he took on a number of consultative positions. In 1932, Eckersley came to Australia, was actually interviewed on a newsreel that I've seen, and recommended to the Australian government that the Australian Broadcasting Commission, then in 1932 being set up, should consider reviving activity on long wave by having two long wave stations, one in WA and one in outback New South Wales, but nothing ever came of it. They did tests again in Queensland, found that reception was completely unsuitable in summer up there because of the tropical storms. So they stuck with the broadcast band until about 1970, when was it, 1973 or 4, when FM kicked off in this country very late in the piece. And I think 3MBS, the Musical Broadcasting Society, the fine music station, was the first station in Melbourne to fire up. Anyway, they have tried long wave, but it was, for one reason or another, not very successful.
Yeah, well, I'm going to pick your brain again at slightly higher frequencies. In 1974, 5-ish, something like that, our medium wave broadcast frequencies changed slightly, a kilohertz or two. Did we go from 10 kilohertz steps to 9 steps? I'm just wondering what that was.
I'm not sure when it exactly was, but I remember it happening, and they did go from 10 kilohertz spacing to 9 kilohertz spacing. I think it was to make room for more stations and also to make room for narrowcasters above 1600 kilohertz. But the interesting result of that has been that American stations in most other parts of the world, Southeast Asia, are mostly 10 kilohertz spacing. So if you've got a big antenna up and a good receiver, variable bandwidth, you're tuning around, particularly with a loop antenna, which will bring in the real DX on medium wave. If you listen for heterodynes as you tune across, listen for heterodynes below the level of the local broadcasters, it's almost certain, unless it's a birdie generated by the receiver, it's almost certain that what you're hearing is something coming from much further away that's not on the standard frequency that you're listening to.
Yeah. I know that when FM came in, I followed it with some interest because it was immediately obvious that there was what was it, the 37 kc subcarrier or whatever. Now, the stereo quality really did make a difference.
Yes.
but with the AM, I just have to, because I was still crystal set listening at the time. I used to go to sleep every night with the earplug in my ear, and it would just fall out while I was asleep.
I tried to go to sleep with Brown's headphones on. That can be the most uncomfortable exercise you could imagine.
Yeah, no, the little earpiece worked much better. But I do recall the broadcasting saying that, well, as of tomorrow, you may need to retune your receivers ever so slightly because there will be a slight change. Of course, 3XY was my station as a early teenager, so that went, of course, from 1420 to 1422, which made me think, yes, it must have been 10 kilohertz steps at one stage. So
yeah.
I wasn't even sure until you confirmed it for me. But yeah, New Zealand are also 9, aren't they? Which is a pity because I'd like to receive ZL. I'm told that if you turn your ferrite core towards Sydney, you can null out a station on, I can't even remember the frequency now, it's in the 1100s, and potentially hear a ZL station. But then again, I have enough fun listening to Radio New Zealand International.
You can do even better if you use a balanced, an electrically balanced loop, centre tapped, a big loop, 1 metre diameter. And if you get it properly balanced, the null can be, 40, 50 dB, so you can almost totally get rid of the local station and hear what's underneath. So the usage of a steerable loop is almost essential if you're doing serious DX on the broadcast band. And back in the 60s, when I first got into it as a kid of about 10 or 11, this would have been 1964-65, there was a gap in the local allocations around about 590 or 600 kilohertz. And in there, very close to 3WV's frequency, was 2YA Wellington, which was a high-powered station. It was 100 kilowatts, where all of the local ABC stations were only 50. And most nights, particularly in winter, the 2YA could be received quite audibly here in Australia, but it did suffer from very deep fading at this distance. You'd have to listen to it for half an hour, and the fades would go up and down in about a 10-minute cycle. Really, it's phenomenal slow fade, but fascinating because as the fade went down, you could hear even more distant stations underneath them, particularly if you stayed up till 1 or 2 in the morning when most of the ABC stations below the middle of the broadcast band used to close down. Back to you, Pete.
Yeah, 3AML, 3ACZ returning. Well, I had some fun trying to do medium wave DXing when I was in the United States of America, and obviously a lot more crowded, but I suppose FM helps spread it out a little bit. But I note that a lot of the places over there have day and nighttime power ratings. I've had a look at, I downloaded a heap of stuff for our, I can't remember what it's called now, but our frequencies and all the information about them, even latitude and longitude of where our transmitters are and the like. And there's only 1 or 2 that seem to have a different power consideration for daytime and nighttime. But I gather in the United States of America they would have all sorts of heterodynes and funny things going on.
They have some funny arrangements over there. One thing I did it. Friends of mine in Salt Lake City, one in particular, Gordon Smith, K7HFV, was kind enough to take me to see the biggest broadcast station, transmitter and studio complex in Salt Lake City, run by station KSL in Salt Lake. And it was broadcasting AM stereo by a very strange system that they don't use in this country. It was compatible AM stereo. The audio was limited to 5 kilohertz treble at the maximum. and they had what they call clear channel operation. Apparently a few stations in USA, if they're running really high power, like 100 kilowatts or something like that, the FCC gives them one of the few available clear channels. In other words, the channel is kept clear of every other station but them, whereas most commercial radio stations are using between 1 and 5 kilowatts, and they can be repeatedly allocated at distances of, say, 500 or 1,000 miles. So it's an odd system over there. The other thing I noticed, what was it that, Mickey, I did some programs on the local community radio station for a friend of mine who was into 1920s, 30s jazz music, just as I am. So I brought over some CDs to play of early jazz music recorded in Australia and did a program with him, and he told me of some very strange rules they have over there. One was that if you have a single performer, you're not allowed to play more than 2 tracks of a single performer in 1 hour. In other words, you can't sit down and have a special program where you play every track on an album. It has to be mixed up with other stuff. I can't understand why they've got that rule, but nevertheless it applies. It certainly applied to our program, so I had to be careful of the timing of playing multiple tracks of single Australian performers. Back to you, Pete.
Oh, that's a bit sad. Well, everything discussed here is taking me back to childhood again, and I know we had a similar start with shortwave listening, but for the life of me, I could not figure out why I could hear 2UE, 4KQ, 5... pick a station interstate. Why I could hear all this stuff at night and was scratching to get as far as 3CS Colac, or if I was really lucky, 3HA Hamilton during the day. It just, I couldn't figure it out, and I put it down to weather, which is a bit silly. But a funny thing to confess too, I also once was listening to something and there was some QSB, and it coincided with a big wind gust. So I decided that wind affected radio
Not
propagation.
really.
Oh, dear. I laugh at it now, thinking about it. But next question for you, Chris.
Yeah.
FM broadcasting, the history of it here. Now, first of all, when one of my favourite bands called Yes, a Pommy band, they first toured Australia in 1973, and I was listening to an interview with the bass player talking about that 73 tour, and he was asked what did he think of Australia, and he said, I couldn't believe they still only had black and white TV in Australia. Anyway, that aside, were we much later than the rest of the world with getting FM broadcasting?
Oh, God, yes. One of the recordings I downloaded off the net was the opening of one of the first FM stations for public listening in America, which is 1948. The system was pushed by Edwin Armstrong, who developed FM as a broadcasting medium. He was also the originator of the superheterodyne principle for receivers. And he was put through such rigours in patent courts that he eventually suicided. But in this country, at least in Melbourne, I'm just reading 3MBS's history. I think they were the first FM station on the air in Melbourne, and although they did test transmissions in 1974, I see that their official air date was 1st of July 1975. So before that there was very little in the way of FM, unless you go back to about 1954-56. There was an experimental FM station set up, I think, on an experimental basis by the PMG, which transmitted from Jolimont, inner city, and I think the programs were provided by AWA, but and they were mostly music. I don't think there was any announcing or spoken word stuff that went on it. So there was a precedent for FM radio in Australia, but by 1954-55, I think the government decided that there was a greater urgency to put time into developing television, which of course started in 56. So FM went by the wayside until basically until the Whitlam government came along and wanted to democratise the airwaves a little bit by providing space for new stations to start up, particularly community stations like the Music Broadcasting Society, 3MBS FM, the Progressive Broadcasting Service, 3PBS FM, and some of the tertiary institutions like RMIT had 3RMT FM, which now still operates, and I can't recall what the I can't recall what it became, but it's something famous now, and it's good for progressive rock. No longer associated with RMIT, however. Back to you.
Okay. Oh, my station manageress has just put in an appearance. I didn't think she would tonight because it's so cold. You know, we have no heating here. She was tucked up very tightly in a ball in her bed, and she's put in an appearance and walked outside the door. So there you go. Hearty soul she is. Now, getting back...
before you go on,
yep.
I've just looked it up. 3RMT became 3RRR.
Okay. Yep. Yes, and I've commented other nights about RRR, so I won't... it didn't become my music standard Eon FM 92.3, I decided, especially with the gorgeous presenter named Jan Cannon. Oh, she not only had a beautiful voice, she was very nice to look at, because I saw her on Hey Hey It's Saturday one Saturday morning, and second only to Sue Howard in terms of her desirability from her beautiful melodic radio voice. I had the hots for Sue Howard in a big way. And getting back to the FM thing, of course, forgive me for digressing, would I be right in thinking that it really hit the ground running in a big way in the United States of America, even though we were slow to on the uptake for commercial broadcasting of FM?
I think it slowly took off. The receivers were very expensive for a long time. I think it started to take off properly in the late 1950s and 1960s in America, but more slowly here. Just getting back for a minute to the digital broadcasting on HF.
Yes.
If you're interested, I can just play you a couple of minutes worth of Radio Romania, which strangely enough broadcasts in English.
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay,
I just sent a QSL card to Romania today.
Okay, well, this was on 17680 kilohertz, which is the 16 metre band, I think. And I recorded the last couple of minutes of the broadcast, heavily accented female announcer, followed by station announcement for close down and their interval signal. Yes, some shortwave stations still have interval signals. Anyway, this is from Romania at about, I think it was 3 o'clock this afternoon. They run a half hour in English, and this is the last bit of it.
One of the most impressive activities for cadets is climbing the mast dozens of meters above the deck. For Lena Mitnevich, a student with the Polish Naval Academy, this moment remains the most powerful.
And there are some hiccups.
Once-in-a-lifetime experience, she said. I love the views, I love the crew, my colleagues. I would say that climbing the mast was my favorite experience here, especially the first time. It was just amazing to see everything so clearly from above. Beyond the technical training, the voyage also means discovering completely different cultures and places than the usual ones for many of the participants. Cadet Dejan Gospodinov from the Bulgarian Naval Academy told us which ports he liked the most so far. I would say Miami and Puerto Rico were my favorites, he says. They are very different from what we know in Europe. The architecture is impressive, the people were very nice and open to us. We had the opportunity to interact with the locals. They were very friendly. The international training voyage of the Mircea training ship remains a complex training experience in which professional training is intertwined with discipline, flexibility, and international cooperation.
And with that, our broadcast in English for listeners in Western Europe and India, New Delhi area, has come to an end. You can listen to our next program for Western Europe at 11 hours UTC on 15320 kHz or on 15130 kHz when you cannot listen to RRI's English language broadcasts on the usual frequency because of Radio.com shortwave transmitter malfunctions, as well as on the internet at www.rri.ro channel 1. Listeners in India, New Delhi area are invited to tune in again tomorrow at 5:30 hours UTC on 17680 kHz in the DRM system or on 17760 kHz when you cannot listen to RRI's English language broadcasts on the usual frequency because of Radio.com shortwave transmitter malfunctions. If you have any comments or suggestions, please write an email at engl@rri.ro. Goodbye.
And now the interval signal. And that's Radio Romania, so there are some English services, not New Zealand, still being broadcast on HF on digital streaming, DRM.
That was really cool, Chris. It lacked something though, and I'm going to show my fuddy-duddiness here.
Yeah, it's strange. It's sort of wishy-washy audio.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's, I suppose anybody who wasn't an avid shortwave listener wouldn't be thinking what I'm thinking right now, about to say right now, but it missed something because it didn't have QSB. It didn't have the odd snap, crackle and pop and all that.
You're too used to it, yeah.
For me, that was part of the attraction. It was coming from the other side of the world. Of course, little did I know, Voice of America was mostly transmitted from the Philippines. As I said the other night, BBC came from Singapore.
Yeah.
Well, forget about the relays via satellite or undersea cables or whatever, but I mean, the bit that was coming through the ionosphere was not from the other side of the world like I thought. Maybe that's why I get such a buzz from Long Path to Europe now on 20 and 17 metres and the like, but it's marvellous. I guess if you're used to really noisy, difficult communication, that would be a godsend, wouldn't it, what you were just playing then from Romania. By the way...
don't take this as being... you shouldn't take the quality that I'm getting there as being an arbiter of what it's capable of, because that's just the random decoder that they have attached to the web-based software-defined receiver. There may be better decoders. I know that Maddie said something about decoding being optimised for speech or music, but not both. And, there may be decoders that are available where you can tweak that, but with the SDRs, they just give you the one decoder and you're stuck with the settings that you've got.
Well, I can imagine that given the complete disaster that music is on System Confusion or Dumbstar.
Yeah.
Oh dear. That's some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard.
Yeah, but it makes you wonder why Romania has retained that service where most other countries haven't.
Well, I'm grateful that they do. Goodness me, HCJB doesn't even transmit in English anymore from up at Kununurra.
No.
But by the way, a bit of useless information for you. The prefix, the amateur prefix for Romania is Yankee Oscar.
All right, okay. I can tell you that that recording was made off a WebSTR in southern Spain, so the signal had leapt right across Europe. It probably was single hop on 17680. 18.4 dB sig to noise was measured. The strength of the signal into the WebSTR was strength 9 plus 10. That's what I notice about most of these DRM stations. They have to have a bloody strong signal before they work really well. And that was being transmitted from a place in Romania called Tiganesti, wherever that might be, Tiganesti, 11.64 kilobytes per second. I also noticed that the French were on this afternoon on 6120. The odd thing about the New Zealand broadcasting service is that most of the transmissions on DRM are in our morning. I have no idea why. I might try and capture a few tomorrow morning just to see how they go. Another bit of news, I've just got another email from Jeff down in Keysborough, who wrote in last night. He said, I'm sitting here listening to the BBC 90th birthday celebrations while looking forward to tonight's crossband. Good to hear you intend to keep the crossband going as long as possible. I find your restoration work, audio and video, both interesting and valuable in terms of retaining our historical past. Well done, Jeff. So that's nice to get some positive feedback for a change, Pete.
Yeah. The only worry I have with your feedback is that you'll get people sending you emails saying, Chris, it's great listening to what you have to say every night, but can't you get that other idiot to shut up? That's why I'm always
not bloody likely, Pete.
The
you keep
Quiet
it going.
Achiever or Mr. Zulu Hotel, the Master Blaster, or others will join us.
It'll be nice to have Steve 3ZH back with us. I think that I did notice on his webpage there were some photographs of him lecturing on the medical implications of 5G and all of that in Cairns.
It's all going to turn us into two-headed monsters, Chris. We need to set fire to all the 5G
Oh, yes. You read the internet.
transmitters.
COVID was spread by 5G telephone towers. I mean, really?
Oh, that's right. Yes, yes. But the numbnuts who were going around setting fire to these things couldn't even tell the difference between the 4 and 5G towers. That was the funny bit.
You try to explain to them the difference between ionising radiation and electromagnetic radiation, and they wouldn't have a clue. So, it's like bashing your head against a brick wall. With Facebook, it seems that every Tom, Dick and Harry thinks they're suddenly, on climate websites. I always ask if it's not stated, does the person posting this climate change interference have any degree in climatology or meteorology or any science degree? And if the answer's no, there's a nice little refinement on Facebook. It's called the blocking button.
I feel like, unfortunately, we don't have that for one famous conspiracy theorist that you and I both know. But the one thing I've heard some of the crazy beliefs, I've just never been able to find out where they come from. I just wonder what his sources are. I guess you spend all your time thinking, pass me the Panadol.
Yes.
Oh no, not this again.
Nazi colonies on the far side of the moon is another one I've seen.
Oh, yes. Well, they had to go somewhere.
Do they?
Oh, I still...
Wasn't South America far enough?
Yeah. I'm still not sure whether there is such a thing as flat earthers. I know it's often mentioned, but it's pretty hard to for me to believe they're actually serious. That big fella who's made squillions being a moon landing denier, I don't for a minute believe him. I'm sure he's riding the crest of a wave and making squillions of bucks. It's very hard to believe anybody's that silly that they... Because you just listen to their theories as to why it was all fake, you know. Only one shadow on the astronauts. Well, if it was in a studio, there'd be more than one shadow, wouldn't there? Because it was one light source, you know.
Well, you get a lot. Look, Facebook is a great place to suss out the latest conspiracy theory. Quite apart from conspiracy theories, there are some. Was that somebody calling in?
Yeah, it was me, Nigel, XKU. Hi.
Oh, good day, Nigel. How are you, Nigel? How's things going?
Oh, not too bad. Yeah, I've just been listening for a little bit. Yeah, flat earthers. I actually knew one.
A flat earther?
Yes, I did. Yeah, he did a bit of the gardening here, and he believed in the flat earth, believed in a flat earth.
Okay.
And he was all about it, and oh, God.
Have you...
How did he come to that view, Nigel? Do you know?
Well, he said, what he said was he pointed to when it was raining, there was some water in a wheelbarrow. He said, wheelbarrow. He said, look, it's not curved, is it?
Then why can't we stand on our roofs and see Mount Everest?
Yeah, I'm laughing too, Chris.
Well, I said, why don't you take a trip around the world? No, on a boat.
I see. So he believes that there is an edge of the world where you'll fall off.
Yeah, that's right.
And what does he think the world is? The world held up by a giant turtle in an...
Well, I don't know. But he did the gardening.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so many clowns, so few circuses.
Yeah.
I believe one of the things that alerted Christopher Columbus to the fact that there might be places to go and see without falling off the end of the earth is that he's supposed to have watched sailing ships disappear over the horizon, watched the hull disappear, and then the masts slowly disappear over the curvature. So, goodness me, if he was able to figure it out in the 1400s and we've still got people in the 21st century, there isn't much hope, is there?
Well, that's what I said. I said, have you heard of Christopher Columbus?
You asked him?
Asked him.
And he said?
Oh, look, I can't remember now, but he palmed off in some way, I don't know.
I think, on Facebook you see a lot of other less obvious misinterpretations. A favourite way that people on Facebook have of dismissing the effectiveness of electric vehicles is that a common response is, oh, well, you're only shifting the pollution to the coal-burning fire station down the road. Well, the obvious response to that is, if you look up the statistics for Victoria, 45% of Victoria's power is now generated from renewables. Not only wind power and solar power, but the solar power on people's roofs. Back to you, Pete.
Yeah, well, perhaps the saddest story I ever heard from a poor person who clearly didn't have enough neurons was, and he had his own YouTube channel, he said that there are no spacecraft, there's no space travel, there are no satellites, because you cannot generate thrust in a vacuum. And how he explains...
I'll tell you what else you can't generate in a vacuum, between his ears.
Precisely. But how impervious to reason do you have to be to maintain that kind of...
I think people sometimes say this for effect because if they get publicity, it almost always can be used in some way to generate income.
Well, that's why I'm suspicious. I wish I could remember his name, but he's not worth remembering. The one who Buzz Aldrin actually thumped one day because this fellow was harassing him.
Good on Buzz Aldrin.
I'm sure a few people would know. Yeah, he called Buzz Aldrin a liar as well as harassing him and following him around. And Buzz eventually gave him one fistful of knuckles.
Isn't it great that a guy that's in his mid-80s can still give a bastard a hiding?
Yeah, somebody who desperately deserved it too, by the sounds of it. But yeah, again, if they came up with anything that was halfway plausible, it would be a first, because you laugh at some of their suggestions that just come from plain ignorance.
Yeah.
But I suppose, well, the trouble with the people who are spreading this stuff just to make money is that gullible people believe it, and you're off to the races. Anyway, enough of all of that.
Yeah. Same applies to chemtrails. People believe.
Oh, hang on. Yeah, listen to that.
Yeah, the vapour trail from a jet is supposed to be us being sprayed with something like DDT. That's
that's what this flat earther said. He was into chemtrails as well.
I'm sure that there'd be a better way of spreading poison among people than to drop it into the huge amount of atmosphere it has to go through from 30,000 feet before reaching us. But I've known people who actually believe that chemtrails are used to mind manipulate people. It's usually people that haven't had a great deal.
You mean they're not? Okay. Well, they're chemtrails, all right. It's carbon dioxide and unburnt fuel. Yeah, that chemical.
Well...
No, I mean... Oh, God. Chemtrails. Yeah. I've got a theory on it. Maybe the real word for condensation trails sort of like, call it contrails, right? A contrail.
Contrail, I think, is a less.
Condensation trail.
Yeah.
Of condensation.
Yep.
Water vapour, right?
Yep.
So what happened? Someone got everything mixed up and thought they meant chemicals, chemtrails.
Well, I know it for a fact that they've measured. I think it took an aircraft strike to do this, but they've measured the difference in temperature when all of the aeroplanes in the United States were grounded for a few days, and there were no vapour trails up in the stratosphere, and it was something like a quarter of a degree difference. So there is a measurable difference to the radiation reaching the ground if the airliners burning all that fuel up there aren't there. But that's as far as I'm aware.
We're producing so much CO2. You know, and they're burning it.
Yeah.
I mean, if only they could burn hydrogen. No, hang on. Oh, hang on, there's feedback. That's because...
Oh.
Hang on, I've got my microphone. My microphone's quite sensitive. Yeah.
Care to make a comment, Pete?
Yeah, I've just asked Quite Achiever if he would join us. He's sent me a very fun fact-filled text message, as he does.
Yeah.
I was quite humbled with his answer to the question of Yaesu versus ICOM yesterday, because he hit the nail on the head. There's practically no difference between them all, but I just like the way he said it compared to my bumbling around.
I don't think
the message is, Christopher Columbus knew the world was round. Most scholars did at that time, but they weren't sure about the size. Columbus thought Asia was a lot closer than scholars told him. The flat earth story came from a book about him in 1828. And I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but Eratosthenes worked out the size of the earth in around 250 BC.
Yeah, I remember that there was some experiment that we were taught about in early high school, that somebody had compared the length of the sun's shadow from a stick that was, say, a couple of cubits high at Alexandria with the length of shadow of a stick some hundreds of miles further south, and worked out that the Earth was part of a circle, you know, a part of a sphere at that stage.
That being Pythagoras.
So there were some facts that were known to the ancients that somehow were lost to science for the better part of 1,000 years through the Dark Ages. Oh, g'day, VK3ARD, VK3AML. How are you, Matty?
I'm good. Oh, let me make sure I'm not feeding back. Oh, I have lots of noise on my signal, don't I? Do I have lots of white noise?
Sorry?
Do I have lots of white noise on my signal?
A little bit.
Yeah, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, well, now I don't even have to come up because I pressured Peter into saying everything. Yeah, it was Eratosthenes in Eratosthenes of Cyrene.
That's the one with the sticks and the...
Yep, with the sticks, and he measured the circumference of the Earth around the equator to within 250 kilometres.
Yeah.
He got 40,388 kilometres, and the actual measurement is 40,075. Absolutely incredible. And yep, he did it with some sticks and a really poor apprentice who had to go off and. I think he did it with used a well to get the.
When the sun was shining down the well.
Yes, to work out when the sun was at the whatever you call it, the highest point.
Oh, for him to be that far out, what a pathetic effort, Matty. He was hopeless. Couldn't he have got closer?
Yeah, he'd never make an astronaut, would he?
Oh.
Not for the next 2,000 years, anyway.
The Christopher Columbus thing is funny because you say, it's funny how we seem to have lost it. Everyone else knew how big the Earth was. It was Christopher Columbus who didn't believe them. They were telling him, hang on, if you go this way, Asia's a lot further than you think it is. You'll run out of food and die. And he said, I don't believe you. And luckily, he found he found somewhere else to get some food.
Yeah. I mean, there are other things that have been known to the ancients that we're only just rediscovering. I was looking at a YouTube clip done by one of the members of Time Team, the British archaeological series.
Great program.
And they've just discovered something new. I forget what the details were about Stonehenge. They've dug up something near Stonehenge which adds to the theory that it was an astronomical observatory. I'm not sure what. I'll have to do some more research on that. But I remember the funny guy with the West Country accent who wears the straw hats and has the straggly long hair. He was talking about this new discovery regarding Stonehenge that the team had made, and it's only been made in the last few weeks. So I'll have to get back to you tomorrow night with some details on that.
The history in that part of the world is fascinating. I don't know about Stonehenge. I've heard so many stories about what it is.
Likewise, the pyramids.
I did watch a video of a guy who was using publicly available LiDAR scans of the countryside in the UK and finding Roman roads and buildings. And and he was mapping, because some of them are very well known, but just using LiDAR to go, this track here is actually a Roman road, and you can see, there was a town here. It's like, oh my goodness, that's it's now farmland, and there's cows in there.
I presume that the LiDAR can penetrate tree cover on the ground.
Annoying thing about Stonehenge now, when my late beloved went there in the 80s, you could walk around and, potentially spray graffiti on the stones, not that you would, but nowadays I believe it's all fenced off because they don't want to cause erosion by people walking around it. But going back a little bit, I still I recall history books that said that Columbus's trip to America brought syphilis back to Europe. And clearly untrue, because they've dug up, they've exhumed skeletons from 11th and 12th century graveyards that show the marks left on bones from syphilis in Europe already. So he was blamed falsely.
It's a wonder they haven't found in Pompeii VD clinic.
See, from what I understand of a couple of the paired skeletons they found, they might have needed it.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that there were STDs in the ancient world that we know very little about. God knows enough of it was going on. I mean.
You'll be happy to know, Peter, that while, yes, you're not allowed to touch things at Stonehenge, cats are allowed up on Stonehenge, so there's often a stray on the side.
What was that? What's allowed up at Stonehenge, Matty?
Cats. Felines.
So they should be.
They keep the rats down, probably. And the rabbits. Presumably there are rabbits in Britain. I can't imagine there wouldn't be.
They've got squirrels. I remember seeing them all over the parks and gardens.
Yeah, they're cute. It's a pity we don't have those.
Well, we've got the next best thing, brushy and ringtails, but yet not quite as prolific and or don't run around during the day, but cute all the same, especially our ringtails. I love them to bits. And my station manageress thinks they're cute too.
Ah, it's a wonder she doesn't attack them.
Very grateful that she doesn't, because she might...
Come off second best.
It might be quite a battle between pussycat and possum.
Yeah, I know of cats that have come off very much second best with brush-tail possums.
Well, speaking of that, and I did mention before that it's very foggy here, I heard a fox yelp only about 10 minutes ago. So I know my station manageress came running in here one night while I was on this broadcast, and Mickey Mox was following her, saw me and decided to depart. But I presume the fox was going to let him or herself in here had I not been here, but it was... I still don't know whether... it was a friendly exchange or not, but anyhow.
A reasonable sized fox could almost see a cat as food.
I've had experience with cats, and I think they're very tough. Well, actually, I've seen a few encounters in the wild where foxes have had more sense than to take on a feral putty cat, and cats are tougher than you might think, Chris.
Yeah, mostly I think they go for birds or rodents.
And rubbish bins. Probably the worst thing for Melbourne with our foxes would be Sulo bins, because once upon a time I'm sure the old metal trash can was no problem at all to knock over and raid the contents of. But as foxes live even in the CBD, they're great survivors, but nothing quite as impressive as I was at Lord's Cricket Ground in London on the visiting players' dressing room looking out onto the ground. This is during a tour, mind you, and it was winter time, so cricket wasn't on. But a fox ran across the middle of the ground, middle of the day. So how cool. Anyway, back on topic. Sorry, I digressed.
Something perhaps as a final question, I'll fire this at Maddie. It's 12:15. We're just about time for me to pull the plug. But Maddie, do you know much about decoders for DRM from shortwave transmitters? Is it possible to get them with differing qualities, or are you stuck with the one type of decoded quality through all decoders?
Yes, that was the other thing I was going to say. So, no, you're stuck. So
what I've heard is about the best you'll do.
Yeah. The options are how it's encoded. So the person making the signal has a few knobs and dials that they can twiddle, that they can reduce the audio bandwidth or change the codec to one that's better for music versus one that's much better for speech. They can, so it's, you can trade a little bit of error correction for a little bit more bandwidth, all those types of things. But for a receiver, you're stuck. You will get exactly every decoder will get exactly the same thing out of it. And there's only one, unfortunately, there's only one decoder, and it's called Dream.
Yeah.
And that's what the Kiwi SDR one is based on. And I think it was last updated about 13 or 14 years ago.
So it's gone about as far as it can then.
Yep. But the thing that you can change is that like an MP4 file or like an AVI file or even like a digital TV, you can put a different codec inside of it.
Yep.
So the old DRMs used just a plain old AAC, advanced audio compression, I think. And now they use something with a whole bunch of letters, AAC2 plus
I saw
low
that.
bandwidth or something.
Yeah. They do that in the header. And one, for example, the BBC, the header says HE_AAC, as you say, and then in brackets it says E1C238, which must be the variation of the codec or something.
I don't know. I don't know that one off. But yes, it's the variation, and because that one requires a license, you got to pay for that. But if you're playing with it yourself, you can use like the Opus codec, like the OGG Opus codec.
Yep.
And that's also multiple different codecs that it will switch between voice and music and one in between, and can put two in the same one, and all sorts of tricks. So there's, assuming everyone's done their due diligence, what you get out is as good as it's going to be.
Yeah, the other thing that was mentioned only in the BBC transmissions of digital on HF, there's a box that says media, and lit up in green was a word I haven't come across, journaline, JOURNALINE, then circle with an R in it. In other words, it's a registered trademark for something, media journaline or something.
Yeah, it's a digital format for news articles.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure it's just a really restricted part of HTML. I don't think it's anything, I think it was someone, someone made a standard and then paid their friend to make sure that it was part of DRM, so they'd get lots of money for it, because it's not, I don't think it does anything. I don't think there's any technology behind it. I think it's just a standard, and it's just one you're forced to use for no reason. But yes, it's I don't know whether the Kiwi SDR one does it, but if you've got Dream, and I can, I'll show you how you can run Dream one day. You can bring up a window, and it will give you like a little news thing to read headlines of news stories if they're inside the DRM data. And it will some of them also have an electronic program guide, an EPG, which will tell you, when the next time it's going to be broadcast. Which isn't that important given how rare the broadcasts are. But I imagine they were thinking of it like digital TV, where you'd have to, be really hard to keep track of what you were listening to.
Yeah. Actually, I was surprised at how many places are transmitting DRM on HF, you can go to a page that's called, not surprisingly, Global DRM Transmissions Schedule. Global DRM Transmission Schedule, and it gives you the times of the day and the frequencies of each of the broadcasters. And there's something like a dozen broadcasters using it, including the BBC, the New Zealand Broadcasting Corporation, Romania, China, Russia. Radio Russia has several frequencies, not as many as China, but still. I was just surprised at the number of these stations, because you're not terribly aware of them as you tune across the band. But
Chris, I'd be very wary of the Russian one, because who wants to listen to Ukraine are trying to invade us?
Well, I did actually decode a bit of Russia, but it was poor, and I think this is... I'll give you a bit of a blast to it. I think it's balalaika music, but somehow... because of the poor signal-to-noise ratio, all of the music packets have been assembled in the wrong order, and it sounds like this. Hang on. Here we go. Wait a moment. It's deciding to... don't know what the hell's going on there, but it sounds like a balalaika played by Spike Milligan.
It doesn't sound like a top 40 hit.
No. So I listened to that for a while, waiting for an announcement, and it went on and on for about 15 minutes. Maybe they're actually transmitting clandestine messages to agents.
A new numbers station.
Yes. Playing music that means nothing.
Well, yes, that reminds me too, Chris, on the Coffin Cheaters net this morning, I think Drew and HK also mentioned a Charlie Wobbly station on 6825, if I remember correctly, and it's just giving groups of numbers at 25 words per minute. So
yes.
Hard for some of them to but anyway, yeah, I just wonder if they're listening to a numbers station.
Yes, well, I don't think we're ever likely to find out what's behind them. Anyway, I'd better just, before I close, take some final comments all around. Would you care to go first, Maddie?
Well, thank you for doing the net and or the test mission or whatever we're calling it. I was
crossband.
And crossband. Okay, so it's good to have something to listen to. I hope I didn't lower everything too much. And thank you, Peter, for the kind words you said about the Yaesu icon thing. That just must have been pure luck. I think I certainly didn't think very hard about it. Have a great night, everyone, and I'll catch everyone sometime in the future. The VK3ARD.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. I think if you compare ICOM with Yaesu in models that have been produced over the last 5 years, there's not too much difference. But I did notice testing, for example, the received sensitivity on VHF and UHF of my Yaesu against similar radios from the 1980s, like the Philips FM 900 or the Bearcat desktop scanner. They're very significantly less sensitive, lot more noise on receiving signals of a given level. And interestingly, even the cheapest of the modern radios, the Baofeng UV5R Mini, which I'm using as a receiver on all of you on 70 centimetres, is incredibly sensitive by the standards of the 1980s, whether they're all using gas FETs in their front end or some special low noise receiving technique or special low noise device in the front end. I don't know. whatever it is, they've got bloody impressive results. Nigel, any final word from you? VK3XKU, VK3AML.
Oh, no, there, not really. Yeah, just been listening, so, yeah, I was still getting feedback. So this microphone must be quite sensitive. So, no, I haven't got anything to say, really.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll hand it over to Peter to tie the ribbons. VK3ACZ, VK3AML. Thanks again for your support.
3AML, 3ACZ. Well, thank you, Chris, for the cross-banding. Thank you to our listeners and the email feedback that's coming through. That's good. Quick comment about, Matty, you absolutely nailed the Yaesu ICOM differences and all that, way ahead of me. But one thing ICOM that's fairly noticeable is the difference in price. The IC7851 retailed for $18,500 here. I can't imagine anybody paying that much money. And sometimes when I was talking to somebody overseas who said, I'm running a 7851, I would wonder to myself whether they were or just trying to tell the world they got lots of money. Because the equivalent Yaesu was, well, you could buy three 101 MPs for that price. Even now, the 7760, their 200-watt flagship HF radio, that's 10 grand, something like that. So, whereas the Yaesu's about 7 currently. I didn't mention earlier on today, I was with my dear 99-year-old who's 18 days short of 100 now. I'm so hoping she makes it because the letter from the King, the card and all that stuff from Charlie the Turd is already waiting there to be handed out to her. My goodness, couldn't they do to him what they did to Charles I in 1649? I'd pay to see that. Forgive me. And, complex grief is a bastard. Not been the best day, but it helped no end by being able to be with you guys. So thanks, everybody, for putting up with me. And it's been another great crossband experience. And it's going to be a big foggy one, so I might give 2 metre sideband a bit of a try in the morning. Thanks, Chris. Good night to all. This has been VK3ACZ.
And thanks again to Jeff from... where was Jeff? Let's just have a look. Jeff from... Keysborough, that's right. Why was that whispered? That's curious. So thanks to all of you. I'll take a brief listen on 147.475 just to make it legal before pulling the big switch. But otherwise, I'll see you gentlemen, and I use that in the broadest possible sense, in 23 hours. VK3AML now clear of 2 metres, listening 2 metres before closing.
Yeah, see you, Chris.
See you, Nige.